But who told you I want to be head of the Americas? That job looks awful.
What story were you telling yourself of what money is at that time?
For me, I always felt like money was freedom. I would say the limiting factor is control, and I would take it a step deeper, and it's self-control. It doesn't matter how much money you have, because if you run your mouth off, you could pay me all the money in the world, and I don't want to work with you. There's the value, there's the benefit of deep and meaningful relationships, is that when you fall, people are going to catch you.
Welcome back to the You Potential podcast. I am delighted you're back for another fascinating conversation. I had the chance to sit down with Fotini. She has spent nearly 2 decades in business rooms where millions of dollars get exchanged and high stakes are discussed often. She wrote a book called Say Less, Get More. And today, in my conversation with her, I wanted to know what she thinks money is actually for and her experience with money and living a good life. This is the You Potential podcast. I hope you enjoy this fascinating conversation with Fotini. Before we head into the episode, please subscribe here on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast.
Fotini, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining me in your beautiful city. It is wonderful outside in Toronto. Edmonton can use this weather right now. I thought we would start with, I understand you earned yourself a nickname growing up as the negotiator. I thought we'd start with how this nickname came about.
Well, if you know anything about the immigrant kid story, that is how I grew up. So I'm dating myself because I don't know how old your listeners are, but if you've seen the movie My Big Fat Greek Wedding, that is how I grew up. So I had to negotiate my way out of the house. And with a very patriarchal, overbearing, big fat Greek dad, there was constant opportunity for negotiations, to the point where my older sister, she's not very confrontational, she's more of an avoidant type of personality, I would be the one egged on, go ask mom and dad for this, because I was the one that was hairless about it, because I was like, what's the worst that's going to happen? I'm just stuck at home. I may as well negotiate my way out of the house.
Were you the youngest?
Yeah.
Was that part of you needed to get your voice heard, so you had to negotiate?
Well, it's sort of like, again, when you grow up in that kind of household, Greek culture is known for being very boisterous. I'd say that's a good word to describe us. So if you weren't loud, you weren't getting heard. If you weren't interrupting, someone would be interrupting you. And I mean, those are lessons that I've unlearned in that sense. But it was definitely something like, if I wanted to get heard, I was the small one, I was the young one, and I needed to make sure that my voice was heard. So I learned how to be a bit more imposing as the years went on. And that certainly helped when I got to the corporate world.
Do you remember the first time where you used your voice? You're like, oh, shit, this works.
I mean, I feel like it was a constant. It was like going to a friend's house. It was, again, my dad was known as the strictest of the strict dads. So even now, like when people talked about Fotini was the one that went away to university, like my dad used to joke with people, they're like, what if she gets into Harvard? Because then the whole family's moving to Boston. It was not an option to do these things. So like that kind of stuff, those were the big milestones where I remember going, it worked. I'm actually going away to school.
And where did you go to school?
I actually did my undergrad at McMaster. I grew up in St. Catharines in the Niagara region. And so it was like a 45-ish at the time before traffic, minute drive. So that was a really big deal for my dad to let me do that. But it was really using every communications skill I had learned at that point to go, look, you're the one that said you wanted me to have every opportunity that you didn't have. And this school happens to have the one opportunity, the one program that's not offered anywhere else. At the time, I was trying to study both arts and science at the same time. And no one else was offering the dual program. And he asked me, he's like, are you sure this is going to open doors for you? I said, without a question. And when you can like get to what's important to him, and it was important to him to open doors for me, there was really no denying it. I just set it up in a way where he couldn't really say no. It's like, you're the one that said you wanted this for me. Are you really going to be the one that holds me back from it? So he didn't want to look like a hypocrite.
There's negotiation at its finest. Do you say arts and science?
Yeah.
What made you think of arts and science back then?
Honestly, it was, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. So let me just not rule out anything.
Okay.
And I knew I would never be a doctor because I pass out at the sight of blood. But I was good at the sciences and the calculus and all that stuff. But I also really enjoyed the art stuff. I was the musician. I was the performer. I was all of that kind of stuff too. So I'm like, let me just study everything and eventually something will show up. And I was like, there's no downside to studying everything. And that's what I did in high school. And then I realized halfway through, I'm like, well, I'm not doing anything with this science stuff. I'm not going to be hiding behind a microscope. So maybe I should keep pursuing these other things. And I turned French into a major. And then I started picking up things like economics that I wasn't thinking about when I first started there. And it ended up in my MBA immediately after I finished my undergrad.
So interesting how little seeds get planted in our childhood and then they start to bloom into things that we probably wouldn't have realized at the time.
Yeah.
You grew up in a restaurant, right?
Oh, God, yeah.
the busyness of a restaurant and again having to negotiate, and I understand you worked at the counter. How did those experiences later come back to provide you with experience that you utilized in your professional career?
Well, there's two things that I got out of that. One is a work ethic because my sister and I, we didn't go home after school. We weren't latchkey kids. We were, well, you're not going home. No one's home. We're going to work. So whether it was watching my parents work when I was in kindergarten, my mom's like, well, you had a schedule. There was Sesame Street and there's so there was all these things. I had a little tiny black and white TV in the office and I'd be parked there. My sister jokes TV was my babysitter. Or when we were old enough to do tasks, you were bussing tables, you were cleaning up, you were helping to prepare food. You were not just sitting around, you were part of the work because there was no option to go home. So you learn a work ethic. When you watch your parents invest so much time and energy into what it takes in order to pay the bills, to get the pair of jeans, to do all those things, you have an appreciation for it. So I learned how hard my parents worked, and I learned that it pays off to work well, but I also learned the balance of I don't want to work like at. And it also taught me communication skills because when you're dealing with customers who can be very irrational creatures at times, and you're put in that uncomfortable position over and over again with complete strangers. If I was sitting at home as a latchkey kid, I wouldn't have had those opportunities. So I feel like I was honing those customer service, those sales skills, those communication skills in general really early.
Yeah. So watching your parents work so hard to earn the money, what did they pay for school?
We had an arrangement.
Oh,
So my parents came here with nothing. My father left with a grade 9 education from his village in Greece.
wow.
And basically his father sent him here along with his siblings to send money back to Greece. My grandfather had a comfortable retirement. But my father worked really hard for everything that he had. And my mother as well. She worked in the family business as well. So she was a working mom while raising us. And I admired that about my parents. And I was like, I'm going to, you set sail on a boat and came to another country. I'm going to carve out my own path as well. My dad's like, no, we're going to pay for that for you. I'm like, no, I'm going to pay for it. And he's like, no, you can't. Because in order for me to afford it, I would have had to leave the family business to go make more money. He's like, no, we need you in the business.
Wow.
And so we had an arrangement. As long as I stayed in the family business, we would manage the expenses together. So I'm very fortunate that my parents to help provide for that education, but I also invested a lot of time and energy in the family business in order to make that happen.
Yeah, I can imagine like hearing that story and knowing your parents came across the ocean and working really hard for their dollars that you're not going to go to university and just waste the time from like sometimes people do.
It happens. My dad warned me of that.
Yeah.
Like, you're not going to be that person that goes and burns through money and flunks out and so on. Like, we're not wasting energy and time around this. And so that was like, there was a little bit of fear there, but I'm so self-driven. I'm such a high achiever on my own. I didn't really need my parents to force that into me. So like, I had high goals for myself from the time I was really little.
So you have high goals for yourself. You're very driven. What was driving you at an early age?
I wish I knew. Honestly, I feel like I've always had this fire in my belly. I suspect it was that if I didn't do something, the opposite would have been some kind of oppression in the sense of I wouldn't have left the house. I wouldn't have done these things. And so it was always that driver to go achieve the next thing. Because even the achievement of negotiating with my dad or being able to go to a friend's house, I think I got a buzz out of that. I really feel like it's that adrenaline rush that people get out of negotiating in general. And so that was something I have a feeling I was just addicted to at a really early age. In hindsight, I was more recently as an adult diagnosed with ADHD. I think that had something to do with it as well, like the dopamine rush of that achievement. Like, I never spent time enjoying the achievement. It was like, what's the next one? If I get an award or whatever, it wasn't like, my parents didn't also do a lot of pat on the back kind of stuff. It was like, yeah, and we expected this of you. Like, you're the straight A student, so what? So I was just like, when am I going to get the dopamine rush? When am I going to get that feeling of reward? And so I just kept chasing the next reward.
Interesting. And I mean, we're kind of baked into our DNA to want the next thing, and we habituate to where we are. Has that slowed down a little bit?
I'm consciously trying to slow it down. It's taking a lot of therapy to get me there, and a lot of great friends who will remind me to celebrate. Like, I was talking to a friend this morning. She's actually my wealth manager as well. And she's like, so tell me more about this award that you got and this designation. I'm like, yeah, it's this thing. She goes, but that's a big deal. When are you going to celebrate? I'm like, I don't know, whatever. It's a thing. Like, it's just part of the career path.
Yeah.
But she's like, why aren't you celebrating more? This is a big deal. I'm like, but it's not in my mind. It's just the check mark. Like, it's the next hurdle. So to have people around you that force you to put on the brakes, that will force you to celebrate, that for me is been a big blessing, to be able to have surrounded myself with folks like that who can remind me when I'm not consciously reminding myself.
So you do enjoy slowing down and celebrating those moments?
I'm learning to do
learn-
it.
yeah.
Let's put it that way.
I find it interesting because, there's definitely two paths where some people are just highly motivated by achievement and success at the expense of so many other things. But then I meet a lot of people who are highly motivated to continue to achieve, and they really do seem to enjoy this arc, and it's not at the expense of other domains in their life. I don't know if that.
It resonates because for me, I think I found a balance. Like, I love my job. I really enjoy doing what I do. If I didn't have a mortgage, I would do it for free. But I also will not say yes to things that I know I'm not going to love. It's very easy to go, no, I'd rather be on vacation instead of doing that thing. I'd rather be spending time with loved ones instead of doing that thing. I've opened up my own eyes to where is my energy best used. So I'm not chasing empty rewards. I might have gotten really good at that. Like, rewards for the sake of rewards doesn't fuel me anymore. So I've got my eyes open to where's the best utilization of my energy.
I like that answer because when people say you got to slow down and enjoy the journey, some people enjoy the journey of achieving things, but it's your eyes, I think, was a key word to use there. Is the accomplishment is what you find successful.
I'm chasing, I think, more intrinsic rewards now versus the extrinsic ones. I think once upon a time it was awards, it was titles, it was that kind of stuff. But I think I reached a turning point a number of years ago in my corporate career before I became self-employed, where I remember a manager once saying to me, offering me a promotion, and I said no to it. And I had just done this deep work through a training program with a coach about, what drives you, what gets you out of bed, and so on. And because I'd become so in tune with what gets me out of bed, it was very easy to say, that doesn't sound like it resonates with me. And they're like, what do you mean? This is the next logical step for you to be head of the Americas. I go, who told you I want to be head of the Americas? That job looks awful. It's just putting out fires. It's, you're not actually doing any client work anymore. That's the stuff that I know fuels me. Why would I say no to that and go for this other thing? I think a decade before that, younger Fotini would have gone, I have to be head of the Americas. If that's the bar, I need to reach the bar. Whereas I'm like, I'm going to choose a bar somewhere else. And maybe not everybody else is choosing that. And maybe there's not as much financial reward for it, but it's going to be so much easier for me to get out of bed every day, chasing a very different one.
You talk about you went through this experience where you started thinking more intrinsically. What was this? What was the shift? Like what allowed you to think like that?
I was really fortunate to go through a 2.5-day training. It doesn't exist anymore, and I really wish it did. It was called the Corporate Athlete. So this was a training that was created for Olympians, NFL players, all that kind of stuff, where they needed to be at peak performance. And then they realized, actually, corporate folks get to be at peak performance too. You need to manage your energy to get through the day. And in that session, I was working with a nutrition coach, a movement coach, and let's call them a headspace coach. And I had said to the person in charge of, like, I have hired all of these people. I've hired the nutritionist, I've hired the trainer, and I've even hired the therapist. What's going to be different this time? She said, now your head's going to be in the game. And I was like, okay, I'm down for this. Tell me what I need to do. And we went through this series of like exercises and self-learning and asking yourself questions. And I remember being at the hotel in the evening having to answer one question about myself and pulling my hair out to try and figure out what's going on inside this head of mine. What is driving this behavior? But at the end of that 2.5 days, I came out of it with, what is your ultimate mission? And you whittle it down and you get so surgical about every word in that statement. And I'd say, I think it's the 13 years later, my ultimate mission hasn't changed. And so I know it's to empower people to achieve their goals and to build deep and meaningful relationships. And so it's very easy when you have that in your conscious mind, when you can clearly articulate it, and when you have that vision to be able to filter things in and out, because it now becomes a filter that through everything. If I get stuck in traffic and I'm getting frustrated, I'm like, is this helping me to empower people? Is this helping me to have the energy to build deep and meaningful relationships? Why am I expending my energy on this? It's not flawless. I still have my struggles with it. But when I'm making choices about my career, when I'm making choices about clients to work with, when, what is going to give me those rewards, appearing on a podcast, that's empowering people to achieve their goals. It may even be building a relationship. Those are opportunities where I'm like, I want to spend my time and energy on that versus other stuff. It's like, I really don't want to do that.
Yeah, and you use the word filter. I can tell just with your body language. You started picking up that when you talked about those two things that came out of there. How do you help empower people to achieve their goals? I underlined that part because I think that's an important state or word in your mission.
Yeah, I think part of it is I force people to do some self-reflection. So, I mean, I teach communication skills. I have a background in negotiation. I've been doing it for a couple decades now, but ultimately that's all that is communication skills. And so part of it is understanding that you deserve to be in the room to communicate. So it's giving people the mindset to be able to speak up for themselves. And the other part is giving them the actual tools. How do you structure the words? How do you show up when you get into a room? And so when it comes to empowering them for their goals, it's understanding what power do you bring to the table? Why do people want to listen to you? What is it that you offer that other people want to get from you as well? And what do you need to get out of this? What can other people afford to do for you? So I give people the mindset of both of those elements. And then we can work on, okay, now that you know what is on the table, how do you articulate yourself in a way that's going to make the other person want to work with you versus against you? So it's that combination. Like, my clients used to joke with me when I worked on like the high stakes stuff, and that happens occasionally where I'm coaching executives. We're in a boardroom, we're whiteboarding everything, and I'm role playing with people, and they're getting ready to go for these high stakes deals. And they're like, "Can't we just put a bug in our ear and you tell us what to say?" And it would kind of be like the Ellen show where she does that kind of thing.
Yeah.
That'd be so much fun for me. But I said, if I don't give you the mindset around it, if I don't give you the confidence around it, whatever I tell you to say is going to come out a jumbled mess. So it has to be that combination of mindset and the words you're gonna choose that are coming out of your mouth.
How do you teach people to get that mindset and that confidence? Because I often find that we might have aspirations or goals, but often, especially in bigger rooms, for like, who am I to be in this for road? So how do you work with someone who just, yeah, and they don't feel like they deserve to be at that table?
It's challenging them. Like, I would say, "Well, how did you get invited there in the first place? Who noticed you? What skills do you bring?" Even if I teach a lot of students as well, like, I mean, my paid work, my lucrative work is in the corporate world, but I do a lot of, student events, and I used to teach MBA classes on the regular, and my MBA students still get in touch with me. But they're like, "I'm the junior person in the room. How come, like, I should really be giving up my seat for that other person?" Because I even ask people, "Where are you physically sitting in the room? Are you sitting at the table or are you on the perimeter somewhere?" And if they're choosing the perimeter, I'm like, "Why would you be doing that? If you got the invitation and you were asked to come in there, sure, you're the most junior person, but you're contributing something. Maybe you're learning to be the next leader. Maybe you're the one who's going to give them observations. Maybe you're contributing in the form of taking notes. If you can't hear very well, then how are you going to document the important things that we need to follow up with later? AI can't do all that stuff. So you deserve to be in that room because someone noticed it. And I have to remind them and challenge them. Why? Why did they identify you? Why did you make it to the top of the resume pile? Why are they talking to you instead of all the other people that they could be calling about this particular initiative? So when you challenge people to identify that themselves, they build their own confidence. But I mean, sometimes I have to give them a bit of a pep talk in the sense of, here's what I see, here's the skill sets that I see, and so on. But I'm not usually spending enough time with folks anymore the way I used to. When I was working on the high stakes negotiations and I'd get in depth with teams for like multiple days locked up in a room or a series of days over the course of months, I knew their skill sets really well and I could pay a compliment and I would make them feel really great. And I go, "I want you to do more of that. You're so good at this. I want you to do more of it." If they don't have feedback from anybody telling them what they're great at and what some of their watchouts are, it's going to be really hard for them to perform in a way that's going to continue to improve and progress. But when you can remind them of the things that they're doing really well, or ask them to remind themselves, or what kind of feedback have you gotten in the past, or what are you most proud of, or when have you achieved something really amazing? When you can p- challenge someone to dig deep and find those things, you can see their body language start to shift, and they sit a little taller, and they smile a little bigger, and that means the world to me.
Yeah, you build an agency themselves that they're like, oh, I could see this in myself. You talk about these high stake negotiations, and I understand you've been in some high stake rooms where there's probably a lot of tension. Was there a time where you thought, why am I in this room? Or I don't know, you have an era of confidence right now. I'm like, maybe you never ever thought that. Was there a time where you're like, what am I doing in these rooms?
Lots of times.
Yeah.
I mean, because I was constantly thrown off the deep end. You know, when there was,
That.
well, I mean, I had bosses who would say, "You're going to go and do this." I'm going to do what now? you'll figure it out. Like, they just have faith in me. They're like, you'll figure it out. And I am that sink or swim person, and I rarely sink. So I'll figure it out because I'm an achiever, because I know I'm bright enough, and I'll make it work.
I love how you said that. I rarely.
Well, I mean, if I'm drowning, I'll figure it. I'll ask for help.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not going to allow myself to fail. If I fail, that means I've simply just made a mistake and I'm learning from it. There's no such thing as total failure in my book. But you don't want to make yourself look like a failure in front of a client, because that means, something could go wrong. They're never going to hire you again. You're not going to get the referral. Again, something I've been working on in therapy to make myself more vulnerable and so on. Because, like, what's the worst that can happen? They know you're fallible, but they also know you're really well prepared. You're going to take on board their feedback and so on. But I have definitely been in a lot of those rooms where I've been thrown out there way before I'm ready. And I've learned from that too. And I've also learned, okay, I can do things even when I feel like I'm not ready. But I also know, even in those moments, if I'm having the imposter syndrome or the lack of confidence, I've got so much information in my brain. I've done so much preparation, whether it was specifically for this deal or years of reading or understanding and so on. I know I'm smart enough that somebody identified me to be in that room. So there's bound to be some way for me to figure it out. I mean, and I think that came from when I was a teenager. I grew up in restaurants. Like, that was just like the caricature of the immigrant Greek kid. But when I was in high school, because I grew up in a tourist area, we were really busy in the summer and we were much quieter in the winter. And because I got a hunger for, like, making money, I was like, I want to make money in the winter. So I got myself a job at the mall selling leather jackets. And after a year of doing that, because I'd be working evenings and weekends, and my dad said to me, you need to quit your job next month. And I said, why? He said, because we're opening up our own leather and fur boutique. And I said, what do you know about leather and fur? Because my father did fast food for years. And he said, I know I have a smart kid. He's like, why should you be making money for someone else? Because he saw what I made on my taxes and the commissions that I was bringing in and so on. And he was like, why should you do it for someone else? And it was like, I had watched my parents, blood, sweat, and tears, what it took to pay the mortgage and do all the things that we were doing. So it was like, now it's like the family mortgage on the line based on my knowledge and experience. So my dad had the knowledge and experience of the finances, the banking stuff, all that stuff. But I was teaching him product knowledge and sales and knowing
How old
merchandising
were you
does. 17.
The start of the.
Yeah.
Wow.
No pressure.
No pressure. Oh, no pressure.
But I'm like, if I can handle that with, like, the world's most difficult business partner, my father, then I can handle anything that comes my way.
No kidding. As you grew up 11 years old, up in restaurant, maybe even before that, to this experience at 17 years old, starting a business because you were good at selling leather coats. When you think back, what story were you telling yourself of what money is at that time?
I think for me, I always felt like money was freedom. I didn't need to ask my parents for stuff, because I was making money, like collecting a salary, summer jobs and all that stuff from, I was probably about 11 when I had my first job outside of my parents' business, because there was only so much for us to do. So my dad got me a job scooping ice cream for one of his buddies, because at least he knew we would be well taken care of. It wasn't a slimy person. Like, how do you send an adolescent off, a child essentially, off to work? Well, you do it with someone you trust. But I learned what it was like to collect a salary. Like, I knew the equivalent of the number of hours I was scooping ice cream and how many pairs of jeans that bought and, those kind of things. So when I could understand that stuff, I didn't need to ask my parents for money for something. I didn't need to ask them for this, that, and the other. And I was like, oh, this is pretty awesome. I can do whatever I want with this. And I also looked at, saving it for something really big down the road. I don't know what it was, but it wasn't just about, material things, but there was something about freedom and money.
Today, what would you say has changed, altered, or stayed the same?
I'd say it's pretty static. Like, my attitude is definitely there. Probably less so on material things and more on just experiential stuff is more important to me. I didn't have a lot of time for the experiential stuff or permission, because that was the stuff my parents were like, no, you're staying home. No, you're not doing this backpacking thing that all the kids are doing. Are you crazy? Not at all. Even they didn't let me go camping in the 5th grade, because they were like, unless it's a hotel room with a lock on the door, what is this uncivilized thing? We came from a village in Greece to send you into the woods. No. So I think now experiences are so much more important to me, and being able to share those experiences with other people. So whether it's treating someone to a concert, taking my nieces with me on vacation, enjoying new places and things and not having to worry about it's not in the budget, like that for me is a different source of freedom.
When we look at like how we think, feel, and behave around money, often like what we learn from our parents, but also our cultural background plays a role in how we see how we want to spend our money and time. I don't wanna make an assumption here, but the the Greek culture seems to be very collective and supporting people and enjoying family and friends. And it's interesting to hear what your version of freedom is doing a lot of what I would assume Greek culture is sharing time with people.
Yeah, we had words in our culture that don't exist in English. So Filotimo, like philo mean friend. That's the core of the word. Is like it's treating your friends. It's being welcoming. It's a word for hospitality that just doesn't exist in a direct translation. And that for me, like one of my goals is for when my friends come over, I'm the worst host in the sense of I don't remember the rules of etiquette that my mother like tried to drill into us. Like make sure you offer them something to drink and you always have something on hand to to feed people and so on. I forget that kind of stuff. But I want people to feel so comfortable in my home that they can go into the fridge and help themselves, that they can treat it like their own. Like I have people staying at my home sometimes when I'm not even there because I'm travel so much, but they're like, hey, I'm coming in from Calgary. Can I come spend the night before I go to my big event? I'm like, yeah, sure. I won't be there, but I'll leave the keys at the concierge for you. I want people to feel that comfortable. And so to be able to treat people to experiences like the comforts of home when they're not at home, that for me is really rewarding.
And so has that influenced your second goal of creating deep, meaningful relationships? Was the second goal that you had?
Yeah, I'd say they go hand in hand for sure. I mean, even the deeping meaningful relationships can even be with people I don't see more than once. So, I mean, it's people who pick up my book who will send me a DM and say, this was something that's life changing. I may not always see it, but I'm there with them. That when they tell me, I ask myself, what would Fotini do? Or I hear your voice because they listened to the audiobook or they remembered me on stage and they're like, when I read the book, I could totally hear you saying it. And that stays with them. Like to be able to have that kind of impact on people. And if they wanted to or I wanted to, we could pick up the phone. That's a deep and meaningful relationship to me.
So from a professional sense, how are you facilitating the second goal of creating deep, meaningful relationships? I hear what you're saying there, but do you work with clients one-on-one? The corporate clients, are you working on this as well?
Yeah, so there's three ways in which people work with me. One is training. So I used to spend a lot of time in training rooms running multi-day sessions with small groups of people, videotaping them, breaking it down, giving them individualized feedback. And then the other part is consulting. So sitting in a boardroom with them, working through their real life negotiations and coaching them through those moments. Again, usually in a group setting, occasionally one-on-one, but allotted to like a group environment or team type of goal. And then the third one is the keynoting. And so I spend a lot more time these days on stages. And that means I'm limited in the other capacities because, quite frankly, when you're on stages traveling and in airplanes, it doesn't leave a lot of time in your calendar to be able to squeeze in these other things or being flexible enough for these other things because my calendar's now booked well in advance in many cases. But I also get the volume from the keynoting stuff. So to be able to be on a stage in a room with 1,000 people and for them to know who you are so that if I go in my LinkedIn and I'm like, I'm going to be in Chicago, who do I know in Chicago? And I go lurking by geography and I'm like, that person, that sponsor from that event, they were really cool. Maybe I'll meet up for a coffee with them. Like to be able for them to remember who I am, for them to want to refer me to people because I've made an impact on them in some way, that's a deep and meaningful relationship. The fact that they are compelled to want to speak my name in rooms that I'm not in says that, and I would do the same for them if I understood their capabilities and so on. Like I talk about my clients all the time to my friends. I'm like, oh, they were such a joy to work with. You definitely want to do this event. I'm constantly referring other speakers to my clients because I want my clients to succeed too. And I can go, okay, I know someone that fits that goal for you. I'm going to connect you with this person, not just anybody, not just like, I want my friends to succeed, therefore I'm going to recommend them for a gig. It's, I can see a connection between these two people specifically. That's a deep and meaningful connection for me, and I want to create it for others. This kind of comes full circle. What I don't do very often is one-on-one coaching. Very once in a blue moon, I'll open up my calendar for people who request it, but I just don't have the capacity to open up those like small windows of time and be consistent enough in people's lives to be able to do that. So what I don't want to do is do a disservice to people by promising something I can't deliver on. And that one-on-one coaching thing becomes very difficult in terms of logistics. And also it's not cost effective. Like it's not accessible. The book is accessible, the keynoting is accessible, the group scenarios are accessible, but it would just not be cost effective anymore to try and serve one-on-one.
Hi, it's Sean. I know I'm breaking into the conversation just for a moment. There's good reason. If you're here, it means you care about living with more purpose, more meaning, and deeper connection. And that's exactly what the You Potential podcast is all about. When you hit that subscribe button, conversations like this, the ones that challenge you to think differently and open to new possibilities, keep showing up to you every week. And when you share this episode with someone you care, you're not just passing along a podcast. You're giving them a chance to reflect, to grow, and maybe even to reimagine what a good life can look like for them. So please take a second, subscribe, share it with a friend. Let's spread the conversations that truly matter. Now back to the show.
When you're talking about going on your keynote and going on stage and these relationships that you're building from referrals, etc., it really seems like your goal, as you described, is to help create meaningful relationships and people achieve their goals or empower them to make their goals. It sounds like this whole journey, you're doing the same thing for yourself.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. I mean, it's this wonderful kind of like the universe takes care of itself, right? When you put good energy out there, I know that it always comes back. So I'm not like trying to do a tit for tat kind of scenario. It's really, if I put good work out there, it gets rewarded.
Right.
If I help a friend with a referral, it gets rewarded. If I help a former client, even though I'm not obligated to now go, you should really talk to, you know, so-and-so or Melissa or Kate or this person because they'd be great for your event. I'm not making it a commission or an affiliation or anything like that. I just know that it's great for this person. At some point, when you serve others, it serves you right back.
is it like to sit there and think back like, hey, I built a meaningful career. Like you built this.
It still blows my mind. Like it blew my mind, I'd say 12 years ago when I quit a job that wasn't serving me anymore. And my clients found out because my former boss called them up and said, you know, Fotini's no longer with the company. I understand she had some time with you. What can I do to help and fill in? They're like, oh, if you're not sending Fotini, don't send anybody. And then they called me and they go, hey, when are you going to come back and work with us? And I said, didn't you hear? I don't work for that company anymore. They're like, yeah, we know. We heard. We told them such and such. We didn't hire them. We hired you. We like working with you. So when I made the announcement on LinkedIn, I had like 50 messages going, can you come and work with us? When are you going to come back? And we're fit. Like I had job offers. I had opportunities for consulting engagements. Like I had people going, how can I help? That for me is incredible. That's just like a taste of the relationships that I was building. I didn't do it for that intention. I didn't do it for that purpose. But there's the value. There's the benefit of deep and meaningful relationships is that when you fall, people are going to catch you. And it wasn't a fall per se, it was a choice, but I jumped and I had all these people there waiting to catch me.
Wow, it's my mind is going, you know, when you tight rope walk, there's a safety net. You jumped and the safety net was the people that you've created these relationships with.
That's how it felt.
Mm-hmm. What caused you to jump?
The diplomatic way is saying our values are moving in different directions.
Mm.
And I knew that for a long time. I knew from like, you know, that event happened in November and I knew in January, the start of that year, I was like, this is not the place for me forever. So I've got to keep my eyes open and to figure out what is the next step. I'm getting myself this year to figure out what is the next step. And maybe I'll meet people along my path. Maybe I'll start asking more questions. Maybe I'll start doing job interviews. I don't know. But I felt myself in that same position of I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up. But I had acquired a really great skill set and a really fantastic network. And I just needed to figure out how they fit together. Because my intention was not to be self-employed. I learned self-employment growing up and I learned the stress of it and watching the ups and downs and what that caused my parents. And I was like, I don't want that. I wanted a salary. I wanted stability. And then I realized salaries and stabilities are not what you think they are because you can get fired any time. And when I found myself in this stability and I was like, what am I paying in terms of my mental health in order to create some sort of stability? It just wasn't working anymore. I'd also hired an employment lawyer by that time. So to make sure I knew what my human rights were and all that kind of stuff and that I could, you know, make a graceful exit if I needed to. So I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew that this was not it. And so I just kept cultivating those relationships and asking questions of the clients who'd become friends and the clients who'd become mentors and the mentors who were outside of my world. And what do you do with a skill set like mine? And the more questions I asked, people were like, let's connect the dots. Let's find a way to work together. And so when the time came, it was like, I guess I'll just do this favor to a friend because my clients had become my friends until I have to get a real job. And then it just kept evolving that way. It was other friends who were talking to their publisher about me. So HarperCollins called and said, we think you should write a book. And I was like, okay. And my alma mater called and they said, we think you should come back and teach MBA negotiations. And again, these are not people I knew personally, but my connections knew them personally. So they were speaking my name in these rooms that I was not in because I was building these deep and meaningful relationships. And it wasn't with that intention, but boy, did it pay off in so many incredible ways. So I just kept getting these opportunities because I kept cultivating relationships everywhere. And I poured myself into them and they poured right back.
That's remarkable that, yeah, these relationships that you're creating end up creating a business for you.
Yeah.
I mean, you did it, but what do you think the key is to creating a meaningful conversation, a meaningful relationship?
I think it's having empathy. And I know that a lot of people mistake empathy with agreement. So me empathizing with you doesn't mean I agree with everything you say, but it could be me saying, I hear why you would think that, and I can understand where you're coming from. Doesn't mean I'm going to agree where we're going, but I can understand where you're coming from. And being able to listen to someone and making them feel heard, number one, it makes them feel like they want to spend more time with you, and maybe they want to get even more clear. They want to put the energy behind the conversation with you. But number two, it gives you the information you need in order to find a way to align with them. If you're not having empathy, if you're not trying to understand where they're coming from, you're not going to build a really great solution that will give space for alignment for the both of you. If you're just forcing your way of doing things on people, it's going to be like a bull in a china shop kind of scenario. You might get there, but the damage is going to be done, and it's going to be very short term. But if you go, I hear some of the challenges you're facing. I don't know that I can address all of them, but I'm interested to learn more and see if there's a way that we can find a solution that's going to work for the both of us. They're going to want to go, okay, tell me what your challenges are then. They're going to take an interest in finding some path that works for you as well.
Really interesting. And my mind is going in several directions here on communication and feeling heard and understood, but also this idea of negotiations coming in. When I think of effective communication, exactly what you said is like, I need to hear you. I want to understand your perspective. I have to empathize. Doesn't have to agree, like you're saying. And the conversation kind of gets co-created to an outcome. I know for myself, if I have a desired outcome for, say, with at work or with my wife, it probably doesn't go well. But if I'm interested in collaboration, then it can. When I think about negotiation, for some reason, my brain's like, I want my way and I have to negotiate. In a negotiation, could some of this just be lip service because ultimately I want my way? That is poor negotiation, but
Negotiation, the word itself gets a bad rap.
yeah, okay.
So we have been fed really terrible misconceptions about what negotiation is. If you look at the definition, it's two people trying to reach an agreement.
Okay, so
It's really just alignment. However, when you hear the word negotiation, if you were to do like a word association with it or an image association with it, one of the things that people say to me, they're like, oh, your life must be so exciting. It must be like that show Suits. And I'm like, my life is actually really boring. As good negotiation or an effective negotiation is like watching paint dry. The stuff you see in Hollywood, the stuff that you hear talked about by the loudest negotiators that make themselves seem like the most successful negotiators, that's the stuff pop culture has fed us, but it's actually not effective. And so that stuff is the stuff that that gets you indictments, that lands you in jail, that gets you fired. It makes great money for Hollywood, but it's not necessarily the stuff that's going to work for you in real life. And so real life, all negotiation is two people trying to reach an agreement. If you go in even with your wife and say, here's what I want to get out of this, what you now need to do is not ignore what you want to get, but you're like, what are some of the obstacles? What are some of the things that she might want to get out of it? What are some of the things that might stand in the way of me getting this? What do I need to understand about her and how willing she is or isn't to do this thing that I want to do? Is there something that I need to identify that I can address, some concerns that she may have? Or are there things that I need to make sure that she understands about why I'm doing this kind of thing to make her want to come on board more? Is there a way I can communicate it that's not going to make her, run screaming from it versus wanting to get on board with it? And is there even something better that we could be doing together? Because I was so tunnel-visioned with what I want that I forgot to look at what's actually possible. Because that's the other big thing that I find is limiting for so many of the people that I meet.
When you're in these big high stake corporate rooms, what did you experience as the limiting factor? If I just threw up two, control or money?
I would say the limiting factor is control, and I would take it a step deeper, and it's self-control. Because I have trained the buyers at Walmart and the buyers at Nestle, or the sellers at Nestle. And people like, if you've trained both sides of the table, who's going to get the better deal? And the answer is always the person who has more self-control. Doesn't matter how much money you have, because if you run your mouth off, you can pay me all the money in the world and I don't want to work with you. That's not an right? I already told you I'm motivated more by intrinsic rewards. Money's a factor, but it's not the factor. So you can't control someone with money. That's why people are turning away from some of the billionaires. That's why boycotting is becoming a thing and so on. But if you have the self-control to know this is when to speak and why to speak and how to speak, that will get you much further.
Where did you learn this importance of self-control in your journey? And I guess my frame of thinking here is you're in a restaurant and you're not pushing physically, but like your voice is trying to get heard. You're the youngest daughter or child, and you need to be loud. But when did you start to realize that maybe saying less or having a little bit more self-control is actually a power tactic?
I mean, it wasn't super early in my childhood, but I definitely would say in my 20s, I was acutely aware of it. Like, I was more observant at that stage in my life. So I was also aware of the bias my own family had towards me because I had a history of being loud and a hothead and reactive and so on. Like, I think my sister got a kick out of making me react. She'd be that person that would put her hand in my face. I'm not touching you. I'm not touching you. I'm not touching you. So, like, it was just fun to push my buttons.
Yeah.
And I realized, and even like some of my early romantic relationships, I was with people who liked to do that too, because like it was very easy to push my buttons. But the more self-control I exhibited and started to use, the less those things affected me, the less fun it was for bullies to pick on you. And I'm not saying my sister was a bully, but she did have a lot of fun in that aspect. But I also found myself being more effective. And it was really hard to break the bias in my own family about what they assumed I was going to do versus how I could actually react when I put some energy behind it. And I started to apply that same thing in other aspects of life, whether it was, being nice to the person at, the Gap counter who was helping me get a refund on something or other, because I grew up watching a lot of the bang your fist on the table types, and that didn't fly. It certainly didn't fly coming out of my mouth. That's a whole other element of gender bias and sociology and all that kind of stuff. But learning that self-control was going to be my friend and not my enemy, because like I had learned so many examples of, lash out, get stronger, get loud, and so on. I'm like, that doesn't work coming out of my body. So I'd say, my 20s were an eye-opening time, especially my early 20s.
Do you remember a time specifically that you're like, whoa, I don't have to slam the pants at the Gap counter returning and taking my refund?
It's going to sound really bizarre, but I remember having a conversation with someone who was notoriously, I want to say, sociopathic. I'm not a psychologist. I can't diagnose people, but I knew enough about this person. We were at a wedding party together. So I was on the bride's side and he was on the groom's side. And this was the kind of person that everybody just kind of rolled their eyes at everything that came out of his mouth. And I had a response. I'm very quick on my feet. So I had a response for every single dig or whatever that he could possibly throw my way. But I decided not to engage. So like when, he's like, I'm the greatest negotiator, all I said was, I'm sure you think you are. Instead of, well, tell me then, prove it to me. Like
Yeah.
I just didn't need to go there. But I could see the wheels turning. Like I'm not getting the response I want from her. She's not giving me praise. She's not, challenging me. She's not doing anything. I was like, that's not fun. But I controlled the conversation and I shut it down versus allowing him to take up space at the table and take up all the air and all of the energy. We could move on to another subject. It was just like that ability to shut that down. And maybe that still wasn't the greatest response, but it was better than what I was inclined to do in that moment.
Fight.
Oh, like when it comes to fight or flight, I'm ready to fight, but I press what I call my mental pause button, and I am so much more in tune with what the moment needs instead of what my autopilot wants to do.
I get the sense of that. You can really, just how you're telling your story, read the situation and pull the proper tool out of your toolbox that is appropriately applied to the situation. How has this idea of saying less or utilizing silence informed the way that you show up in your work now? I mean, your book is titled Say Less, Get More.
That's right. Yeah.
Is it around the same premise that we're talking?
Yeah, there's so many reasons for that title. One is saying fewer words. People talk themselves out of a deal all the time. It's the difference between saying something like, the price is this versus I think I could probably maybe actually do it for around this. Like, which one sounds more confident? So say less, you'll get more out of it. But also it's taking the time. It's pressing your mental pause button to say less. Take all the information in that you need to before you think you need to think and talk at the same time. Because thinking and talking is really dangerous. And so you might say something you regret. You might say something that you want to pull back. Take your time, think it through, and then choose the words you want to share versus, oh no, I shared that by accident. And then it's also just taking the time to go, what does this moment need right now? What are the other opportunities that are out there? I will admit I'm very quick at processing stuff. And again, I attribute that back to my ADHD brain. I think that's one of my superpowers. But I tell people, take more time than you think you need. Like, write it down before you say it out loud. Write down your questions before you interrupt somebody. Those are some of my coping mechanisms for ADHD because I want to jump in. Like, my brain is ready to jump in. And I've learned how to cope with it over a number of years. Now that I'm learning about ADHD as an adult, I'm like, oh, that's why that works for me so well. It's like it's been a coping mechanism I used for a long time to manage it. But it's those moments of just saying less to go, what's going on? What's the temperature like in the room? Who am I dealing with right now? What's their personal experience like? All of those things are the things that you need to take on board because they're all data points. And if we all agree that knowledge is power, I think we've all heard the phrase, take in all the knowledge, take in all the data that you possibly can before you do something that you may regret.
You seem like quite a curious person.
Super curious. When my sister was having a baby years ago, almost 20 years ago now, she was pregnant and I was schooling her on, here's the strollers that you need to get because my parents were going to gift her the stroller. And my brother-in-law was like, what do you know about having kids? And she's like, if Fotini wants to learn about something, she will learn everything. I'll be reading consumer reviews. I'll learn about the brake system, how it collapses. Like, even though I've never learned about it before, I want to know everything. Like, I'm a data collector.
So as you help people and yourself achieve or empower to achieve your goals, I think I don't know the answer, but what would you pick, certainty or curiosity?
Curiosity is more fun.
Mm.
I know I'm always chasing certainty, but like I've always said, I want to know there's a plan. I just don't want to be obligated to follow it. I want to be able to take, side roads and, explore a little bit more. But I like to have a North Star. The certainty, I don't know, it gets boring. My brain favors novelty. So that curiosity is always going to be there.
I think I read online that you talk about this phrase, which I think is born out of curiosity, but help me understand. Was that something that?
I mean, that's one of the many tools. I wouldn't say it's a cornerstone, but it's definitely something that is in my brain. Like, I need you to help me to help you. Right. And if that's a need, you're in the power seat from that perspective. So if you're in a position to help me, that makes you powerful. That's great. That gives you a power to be able to have over me because we won't get to the destination we need to get to if I haven't understood what's going on with you or what's keeping you from joining me on this journey together. So if you can find a way to communicate that with someone to go, let's go on this journey together. Let's be cooperative about this. That's what makes them want to come on the journey with you versus being forced down that path.
The more you talk about negotiation and just your response there, I feel like my framing around negotiation is moving more towards cooperation.
Yeah.
To use the word you just used there. And I think that's important because I was one of those guys who thought negotiation is, there's a book, famous book, like Never Split the Middle or
Never Split the Difference is one of them.
I hadn't read it, but
yeah. There's some soda nuggets in there, but there's also some tactical stuff. I mean, that was written by an FBI hostage negotiator. And so I quoted him in my own book. He has some great nuggets about questions. Questions are a tool that we all use. They're tied to that curiosity element. He also has some stuff in there that are not applicable in day-to-day life because we're not in hostage situations.
Right.
So you've got to take everything with a grain of salt. There's some of the other stuff like The Art of the Deal and The Wolf of Wall Street and all of that kind of stuff. A lot of the bestseller stuff that's been around for decades does not work in today's environment. It worked because we tolerated a certain type of behavior from a dominant group. And so when that dominant group was using it, we thought it was okay because that's the systemic bias that existed in our time. The bias is starting to change a little bit. We're seeing more women in the workplace. We're seeing more diverse faces and voices and all of that kind of stuff. So the iron fist type of tactics or the manipulative type of tactics that used to exist are not as well received today. And I learned the hard way very early in my career and even in my upbringing that when I, as a woman, I couldn't say the same things my dad did. Like the whole iron fist thing, the bang your fist on the table stuff may have worked for an empowering or a domineering big factory dad, but it didn't work for the little girl, so to speak. Or it worked for somebody who had a name named Smith, but we know from studies on gender bias or cultural bias that a last name like mine wasn't going to be received the same way. Like we know when two resumes with different names, one that you can pronounce and one that you can't, people are going to choose the option that is easiest, right? The one that they know. And so if all we knew was dominant leaders who led with an iron fist, then we were okay with that. That's not all we know today. So those tactics are not as well received. And so we have to think differently because also we leave a digital footprint everywhere we go. Even your Uber driver is giving you feedback. So if you behave a certain way with your Uber driver, no one's going to want to pick you up next time. So it's thinking about all of these elements is that we leave a footprint everywhere we go, whether it's LinkedIn recommendations, whether it's being able to call up somebody on Zoom that you would never have been able to connect with if you weren't feet on the ground in their city before. Those are the things that we need to consider now. We are so much more connected. Our reputations are much greater. People are more conscious of what they write in their comments and on their social medias and all that kind of stuff because stuff they wrote a decade ago is coming back to bite them. All of these things mean that we have to be more conscious of how we communicate. And so the tactics of yore aren't necessarily the things that work today.
What's it like being, I would say, a leader in changing that culture of how we used to lead?
I mean, it's rewarding to see people shift their mindset around the word negotiation, similar to what you said. Like if people can see it as a cooperative exercise, and that doesn't mean everybody's going to walk away completely even in everything. That's not what cooperation means. It means that we're going to come to a resolution. It might be exactly the same resolution that would have been done with the iron fist, but people are going to do it more willingly because they're going to go, I don't feel like I'm being forced into it. And I can understand why this is the only option and I'm okay with that versus I'm resenting you because you're forcing me down this path. That's a very different outcome. And the repercussions of those outcomes are going to be very different in one scenario versus the next.
It sounds like there's a natural understanding that comes with the process that you're describing, even if it doesn't go my way.
Yeah.
I understand now as part of the process, as opposed to be pushed aside and forced into this way.
There's the word we use is satisfaction, right? So both of us can walk away satisfied, even if I got nothing out of it, because I felt like at least I was heard. I felt like at least I was acknowledged versus being steamrolled in this scenario. So if I was acknowledged of it, I wish I really could do all the things that you want. There's just no budget for it. If you can find a way to help me find a budget, then I'd be happy to work with you. And if you can't find a way, now you're like, okay, well, if I can't find a way, then how can I expect them to find a way? I'm satisfied that I got it out that I got it out there, and we still got to the same conclusion. It might take a little longer sometimes, but the damage control you have to do on the back end will save you so much more time. Because it's not just the close. It's not just we're going to shake hands and we're in agreement now. It's what's the delivery and follow-up going to look like? Does it have to take you 10 emails to get this person to actually follow through on the thing they did because they're resenting you so much? Or are they going to answer you on the first email? It's those little elements that also make a world of difference for us.
Switching gears a bit back to your book, what is it like to be a published author? Would that young version of you at the counter, at the restaurant counter, ever think you'd be a published author?
Never in a million years. It's weird. It's weird when people can tell you stuff that you forgot you wrote about.
Yeah, I bet.
I was just sharing with a friend this morning, somebody who was in my DMs and I gave a couple pieces of advice to wanted to send me a thank you. And I thought it was going to be a card. So she asked for my address and it was not a stalker scenario. So I felt safe to give it away. And I ended up with like this George Michael nightlight. Because I'm a big George Michael fan. And in the book, I give an example using George Michael, my George Michael mug as my prized possession, using that as an example for negotiation. And people pick up on those little things, or they'll ask me a question about my nieces, because I mentioned negotiating with children and my nieces. And I was like, I forgot I told that story in the book. Like, it's so bizarre for people to know those details about you. And my book is not a biography. It's not like it's a ton of information about me. But it's really strange when people say words back to you that you've said out loud. It's like, oh, I said, oh yeah, I did say that. It's very odd.
That must be, yeah. What a good feeling. What was it like when it finally hit published and it was real?
Terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. Because while you're in editing, you can take it back and so on. But once it's published, there's no, like, it's not even like Facebook. You could delete a Facebook post, right?
Yeah.
But you can't take it back. it's out there in the universe. So you have to publish something that you are really proud of, that you can stand behind. Have I shifted slightly in some of my thoughts around some of those early days things? Yeah, absolutely. As I learn, I'm evolving, but I don't think there's anything wrong in the book or anything that I think is indefensible today. But it is really, you've got to be so confident in what you're putting out there. And if I didn't have a really great editor, I don't know that I would have felt that way.
Um, I see the time. I know you have another meeting. I'm always curious people's lens on what makes a happy life for them. I feel like a lot of the work we do is in service of living this good life. For you, what makes you happy?
It's a couple things. It's freedom, right? To be able to make choices, to be able to say yes to the stuff you do want to do work wise and no the stuff you don't want to do. But it's also having people to share those experiences with. And I don't just mean romantic partners, but I mean like friends, family, and so on. And I have curated a very lovely group of people in my world who are cheering me on, and who I want to share experiences with, and people who I love and who love me back. So to be able to do things with those folks and the celebrations, the experiences, and so on, I think those two things really need to go hand in hand. And I mean, I read about the Harvard studies and all that kind of stuff about happiness, and I it rings true for me because I've done a lot of solo travel in my life. Travel is one of the things that makes me very, very happy, but I get more joy, even if we're in the same place, of sharing it with someone. Like I love now taking my nieces with me on vacation because I get to show them the things that I've already explored once, I've already discovered, but to watch them discover it and to be able to give them that experience is so joyful to me.
Is there a specific place that you got to rediscover with your nieces that is most recent in your mind?
Yeah, a few years ago we went to Greece together, and it was their first trip, and I don't know, millionth trip there.
Yeah.
We're doing it again this summer, so to be able to show them my favorite haunts and like the best foods and the little, alleyways and the coolest beaches and like the secret stuff that I discovered just on random road trips on my own, like that has been really great.
No, it's travel through younger people's eyes is a beautiful thing. Did you share your favorite spanakopita place?
I'm actually allergic to spinach. So
Oh no!
I'm the Greek person who can't eat spit and spanakopita anymore.
Sorry how I said it.
But I do share those things. Like,
Yeah.
and I've got like Google Maps share for all of my friends who are going to like Athens and places like that. Like, here's the best place for this, and here's the best place for that. And it's been great.
So as we wind down here, what do you think your dad would say? The guy who allowed you to go to school and not work in that family business, seeing what you've accomplished today, what would he say to you?
He wouldn't say much. Again, like these are not people.
Get back to work.
Yeah. I mean, when I told him, I called him to tell him I got a book deal. And I get my parents don't understand the publishing industry and they don't know that a lot of people are out there pitching books, whereas I was asked to write one.
Yeah.
I was like, I got this book deal. I'm going to be writing a book. He's like, that's nice. So your godfather was asking me when you're getting married. Then I was like, what? I go, I just told you this really big stuff. He goes, well, what do you want me to do, Fotini? He started jumping up and down. I said, that would be the appropriate response. He goes, well, I don't know. He's like, when are you going to give me grandkids? I'm like, you already have. Got into a fight. I was like, you already have grandkids, but I don't have them from you. Like one piece of good news turned into, but where's this other thing that's really important to me? This other thing that I thought your life was camping. But yet he'll be really proud of like the first time I bought a condo and he was telling my uncle something like, she has her own thermostat. Because he didn't understand how apartments were like controlled by someone else. It's like now she's made it.
They had her own heating system.
It's so strange. It's very hard to predict those things. I know they're proud of me, but it's just like you don't hear it much about households like mine.
Yeah.
You actually hear from other people who say, your dad tells me he's so proud of you.
You're like, yes. If you were to write a book, more a biography book, what do you think you would call this chapter that you're forward looking for now in front of you?
Oh, I feel like it's the evolution chapter. I feel like I have been in a scarcity mindset for quite some time, and I've hit this point where I'm manifesting things. So maybe it's a manifestation chapter. I don't know. I think I've been manifesting for a long time. I just didn't acknowledge it, like creating those relationships, planting those seeds, not knowing that they were going to flourish in so many cool ways. But I was in this scarcity mindset of get all the gigs you can and say yes to everything because you never know where the next, mortgage payment's going to come from. And that's what I grew up in. It was very much a scarcity mindset. At least with one of my parents. With the other one, it was the opposite. Like, take big risks and get big rewards. But I saw the roller coaster of that stuff, and I did not want the roller coaster. So I was like, get everything you can, squirrel it away for the rainy day fund. And now I'm like, I planted enough seeds that I'm manifesting all the things that I want, and I can have more freedom to make bigger choices.
We'll end here, but I'm really curious. I talk to a lot of business owners who tend to be in midlife, and they have a very similar sensation that you just talked about. Is like they've been working, squirreling away, and they're like, "Oh, time's passing. I'm on, maybe the back end of of this journey, depending on how long we live." But what has allowed you to relax a bit more and not feel like I got to constantly squirrel away?
I think part of it is just financial security, knowing that I'm on a path, I've got a safety net that is big enough. Like if push came to shove, I know I will be okay because I can liquidate this and I can manage that. So just knowing that that financial piece is covered gives me a lot of freedom. I know we shouldn't attribute, happiness to money, but there's a baseline you have to hit in order to have the freedom. And I know that I've hit the baseline. I'm very confident that I've hit the baseline. And that just gives me the mental capacity to focus on so many other things.
Hmm. There's been recent research that this line has always been blurry. Like, how much do you need? But two really intelligent researchers came together because they had kind of competing research. One said it flatlines after a certain amount. The other one said, no, it doesn't. But they came together, and there certainly is a point that money does create happiness. It curbs you from financial distress. It gives you security. But then they discovered, yeah, no, if I know what I like in life, if I know what my values are, I know how I want to spend my time, money does continue to help increase your levels of happiness if you use it on the things that are meaningful to
Yes.
you.
Even now, I mean, I've talked about it with my financial advisor, and I'm now starting to put aside a fund for my nieces to come with me on these trips. It's one thing to fund yourself. It's another thing to go, okay, well, I want them to come along with me, but they're not going to have the money to do this. And now I'm going to start a fund just to be able to, bring them on board for some of these adventures, or maybe I'll use it for friends or whatever. But to now be in a place where I've got the baseline for me. And if I have more money, I can have a different baseline to bring others on board for the journey too. And it's just going to elevate all of our experiences. I'll be happy if that never happens too. I'll find another, opportunity, different experiences that are a little cheaper and closer to home. But, that freedom comes with, the more of that foundation that you have.
Yeah. Well, I have a final question to ask everyone. But right before that one, I want to ask about, I put this, your goals here, your aspirations is to help empower people to achieve their goals and to create meaningful relationships. For people listening, what is one key ingredient for both of those as we end this conversation?
It's the curiosity. Be curious about people, like who is in front of you right now. Maybe that's an opportunity for a relationship, but also what's holding them back or what's holding you back from being able to connect with them. If you can be curious about who is in front of you right now, you never know what could happen, who you could help, and who could help you as well.
Yeah, that curiosity is important. Tal Ben Shahar, he's a positive psychology researcher. He talks about how curiosity kills the cat, but his research shows that curiosity extends human life. So it makes humans live longer.
I believe that.
So my final question that I've asked everyone on the podcast is, let's imagine you're at end of life. It doesn't matter how old you are, but you find yourself sitting on a front porch, looking out at a view that gives you complete peace, ease, and a sense of feeling content. You decide to write, or you pull out a notebook and write one last letter on what you learned was a key to live a meaningful life. What would be in that letter?
What would be in there? I guess it would be a description of where I am and what's possible. Because if, as you said, that I can picture myself somewhere where I'm overlooking water, because that makes me really happy. And knowing that I have fulfilling experiences of people around me to share that with. And so if I can describe that to someone and say, if you follow these ideals, this curiosity, this need for connection, then this is what you can have. Because I no doubt in my mind, that's what I'm going to have when that day comes.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your time today. For listeners who are curious about your book, your work, where would you point them towards?
The website, FotiniIcon.com. I made it really easy by not having to spell my full name. Instagram, @FotiniIcon as well, and LinkedIn are places where you can connect with me and follow along when I'm sharing little nuggets. But the website's pretty much got everything. The book is available everywhere, whatever your favorite bookstore is, or Amazon if you really want to go there. But yeah, I encourage people to follow along and keep asking me questions because it makes me better at coming up with content that serves them.
Thank you for your time, and thank you for Melissa for connecting us.
I sure will thank her when we're done.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in this week to the You Potential podcast. I really enjoyed that conversation with Fotini as I got to hear how she thinks and feels around money and how that resulted in her behaviors and the way she interprets money and a good life today. I thought it was super insightful how she talked about her family origins and the impact it had on the way she thinks and feels about money and a good life. So my question for today, for all of us, is how do you think your intersection of living a good life and money relate? Because sometimes it's not the answers, but the questions that are worthwhile. Until next time, take care. Please subscribe here on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Thank you so much. We'll see you next week.